Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Kristi Kennedy, author of Overcoming Obstacles, Turning Tragedy into Triumph. Kristi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here.
Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
The one word I would give is accountability. I think whether it's a writer's group, a good friend, a business mentor, or maybe you're just super self-disciplined and you've got goals set on your calendar, but it's got to be someone or something to hold you accountable. And then once you're through that process, an excellent editor who, again, will hold you to those deadlines. And the reason behind that is if you don't, then you're likely going to have everything under the sun get pressed in front of your writing, and you'll have a book in your head forever but never get it to pen and paper.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think, personally anyways, the hardest part is kind of overcoming your own fear of rejection. Like, what if people don't like my book? What if people read it and don't like it? And so then your own fears will hold you back to push forward. So I feel one of the hardest parts is getting over your own fear and, that it might not be as good as what you think it could be. And so whether it's not finishing or not sending it out once it's finished, you have to push past that. And for me, having some high-profile endorsements was a huge thing that I did to make a difference for my own confidence. When I sent out my book to have it reviewed, and I got some really amazing endorsements back and very encouraging words about the writing of my book from those in the industry that it was for. That just gave me a huge boost of confidence to just go ahead and send it out to publishers.
Yeah, and that's a great strategy to go out there and get those endorsements. I've done that for every one of my books, and also reaching out to people to do forwards for those books as well. And it's amazing because you send it out there, you're not quite sure what's going to come of it, and they're like, hey, I loved your book. I can't wait to give you a testimonial or endorsement or a review that we could use for editorial reviews. I mean, it's just so great because when you do have that information to share, people are more than happy to support you with that.
Right.
And then with your book, do you publish it yourself or did you go through a traditional publisher?
I actually went with a traditional publisher. It was several years ago, and we didn't have as much online resources. But what I know now, there's so many more options to do online publishing and self-publishing. I think it's the marketing is more critical than the publishing, and I think people don't recognize that fact. That even if you go with traditional publisher, it's still a lot about you to do the marketing.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest eye-opener. With the exception of Penguin and Random House, any other company, for the most part, you're expected to do the lion's share of the marketing, and that's probably the biggest eye-opener that I've gotten personally over these past few months, is the fact that I've had so many traditionally published authors on the show, and just about every single one of them told me, it's like, hey, when it comes to marketing, you're on your own.
Right. And when you're looking at those larger publishing companies, like you mentioned, you can't even look to go there unless you have a very well-established platform. And how have you developed that platform but by your marketing? So, I think the bottom line with it always comes back to you've got to be marketing and you've got to establish your platform, and then you could go to one of those publishing companies, or you've got to know how to push out your book to create a platform. So.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind me asking, which traditional publisher did you go with?
I actually, I submitted with Moody and was on back for them. And then Tate Publishing is who published it originally, but they were bought out by somebody, and I don't remember who it is now.
Well, and that's the thing. Publishing changes so much, and it's one of the biggest things
Yeah.
is the biggest consistent is change, biggest constant with that, because it always is. It's constantly evolving. Even stuff with Amazon, with Create Space now ending, going into direct publishing. I mean, there's so many different things that change, and you have to be ready for that because the biggest consistency, as I mentioned, it's change. It's always the biggest constant.
Right, right. And especially in today's digital world, you've got to be on top of it. And I think that's the key is you've got to constantly be educating yourself. If you want to write a book and you want to publish and market, you've got to be on the cutting edge of what to do and who to do it with and how to do it.
Absolutely, and if you don't want to keep up with it yourself, then hire someone that does. Because with our company, with many other companies out there, one of the biggest things is you have to be watching the trends because it does change. I mean, just in a book launch a few months ago, it's changed tremendously, and it's just the biggest thing is change with that. And you bring up a great point too, talking about marketing, and that is going to transition perfect to our next question, and that is to please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that works well.
Awesome. Well, I think number one is working with a marketing expert if you're not a researcher, to research it out yourself like we were just talking about. So someone like yourself with your coaching program, that's key. If you want to be on the cutting edge and you want to know what the current trends are, you've got to work with an expert. And then for me, speaking was key. I acquired speaking events and book signing events, and then in those events, because my book was not a fictional, but I think you could wrap fictional around this, but mine was focused on more self-help when it comes to autism and recovery and treatments and all of that. So the key with speaking or book signings is offering free keys from your book that will give the audience the ability to make huge progress in the area that your book addresses, right? So your target audience, in every case that I spoke, I would sell more books than those who came in attendance because they wanted it for their people that they knew, their circles of influence. And the reason why behind that was because I would give them many of the keys from my book that helped them make progress right away. So they had takeaways that they could take action steps without ever reading my book. And then I also always do Q&As. And a Q&A allows me to learn more of what my target audience wants to know or needs to know. And then it gives me better marketing material. So now I can use their language and communicate to them.
So you're talking about doing Q&As like at the end of your speaking events?
Right, right. Well, at the end of my speaking events, yes. Now what I do is I use Ryan Levesque's ASK method. That has been absolutely transformational for everything we do. It's a neuroscience-based methodology for discovering what your target audience wants or who your target audience is if you're not even sure yet. Identifying what product or book or subject they want and then creating it. So using that method, it just becomes a win-win marketing strategy. Everybody wins because you're producing what people want and they're getting answers to their most pressing questions.
Yeah, that is an absolute great method. It's essentially market research 101.
Absolutely. That's key. And then as far as marketing strategies and launching product, Jeff Walker product launch formula, that's been a key system that is real easy to use and works.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
When I saw that question, I thought, oh my goodness, there's so many. How do I narrow it down to number one, right? But I would say right now in my wheelhouse, Brené Brown's work. Her most recent book, Dare to Lead. And one of the number one things that I learned from it is courage over comfort. In other words, having the courage to lead over the comfortable way to get out of doing the hard stuff. And, she talks about being brave and embrace the suck and all of that, because that's just part of it. And I think whether you're a solopreneur, whether you're just you're an author and you're writing and speaking solo, or whether you have a team, no matter what it is, you've got to be a leader in this industry. And so to me, that book is just phenomenal.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
For me, personally, I think it came down to be strong and courageous. And it's actually from the Bible in Joshua chapter 1. And the reason why is because it reminds me to never give up. We've had to overcome, obviously, my book, Overcoming Obstacles. It's one tiny, tiny section of life that had to do with working through having a child with autism. I have 5 kids, and one I was told to institutionalize when he was 5. And so the journey to overcome, it's really not so much about autism as much as it's about overcoming the obstacles in life through, and embracing that and learning greater character and greater leadership, greater perseverance. And so as those obstacles come, just being strong and courageous and not giving up.
Well, Kristi, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way is to go to B as in the bumblebee, BEE, friendlynow.com. So B as in the bumblebee, BEE, friendlynow.com. And you can find me on social media at Kristi with a K and an I, Kennedy. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and all that as well.
Kristi, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.